Flywheel, if you've been to San Francisco in the last dozen years or so, you'll see these shiny red Flywheel taxis driving around on the streets. And the funny thing is, Flywheel started as the first cars on a map ride-hailing app. Before Uber, before Lyft. I was the first CEO. It began before then in an incubator that I ran for Best Buy, and the prototype was created by a kid named Daniel Garcia, who's not a kid anymore. And he had this intention to put his Geek Squad car on people's smartphone maps so that they could see him on the way to installing their TV. So we gave him a team of 3 or 4 and 9 weeks and some money, and we put them all in Park La Brea, Los Angeles, in this house together. It's kind of like real world Best Buy. And very quickly they figured out that customers, at least in 2008, did not want this. But then they all went out to a party in LA on a Friday night. They came back complaining that they could not find a cab anywhere. And they were like, well, there's cabs everywhere. Why can't we find them? Well, they're always, LA is kind of spread out. There's always one out of sight, out of mind, around the corner. Can't find it. Eureka. And the era of the invisible driver. So we went ahead and built that. Now turn the page. 2009. There were plenty of apps out there that would allow you to book a taxi. There was Taxi Magic. It was one of the most notable ones. You could book the car, but we had this assumption that seeing the car on your own map driving around was somehow important. Now that seems obvious today, maybe, but not in 2009. So what did we do? Good lean startup, right? We did an MVP. We took a couple of days and built a fake iPhone app, walked out onto the street, and found people and screwed up our courage and went to them and said, hey, what do you think of this? And if they got excited and pulled their smartphone out of their pocket and tried to download the app, we'd note that down, and then we'd tell them it was fake and give them a coupon to get a hot dog. And you got to give them a reward, otherwise they get mad at you. And that was great. And in fact, the results of that test gave us the confidence to build the app. I think that's a pretty good example of lean startup, like Eric Ries and Steve Blank talk about. I bet everybody here is familiar, or most people are, with that. All right, but there's a problem with lean startup that can snare the unwary, and I think that the 2-but rule can really help with this. So here's what happened to us. Second test. We had raised about $1 million. Wasn't a lot. We raised like $50 million later, but at the time we were trying to really store money up. So we thought, okay, we'll put the driver app on taxi drivers' own smartphones. Now remember, this is 2009. So we had a big assumption that taxi drivers had smartphones. Now, funny thing is, we had on team a developer who was a coder and a taxi driver. By the way, if you're building a taxi app, it's a good idea to hire a coder who drives a taxi. So we did that. And his idea, brilliant, was for us to go call all of the dispatchers. In those days, you had to call dispatch, and they would call on the radio to the taxi drivers, and they would go pick you up, and it was terrible. And tell them that any driver that showed up to Bob's Donuts on Polk Street on a certain night would get, showing us their phone, would get coffee and donut. More than 100 drivers show up, phones in hand, and 25% or more had iPhones. And we thought, terrific, that's enough to start with. So we committed resources, we built the app. By the end of 2009, we were out there, before Uber. But there was just one problem. Anybody know what it is? All right, it turns out, in those days, drivers liked to jailbreak their iPhones. Do you know what that means? Right? So they jailbroke their iPhones, which allowed them to run the app. And it made it seem as though everything was fine. But in 2009, cellular networks wouldn't handle both data and voice at the same time. So if you were talking on the phone, you weren't getting any data to or from the phone. And taxi drivers are on the phone all the time. So no one was getting any rides. People were very upset. That was a costly mistake. You see, what we did is we did not lean into our butts. We should have used that opportunity not to validate our assumptions. we should have used it to joyously go out and look for all the new butts, everything else that doesn't work. We should, in fact, this is my pro tip to you. The next time you're running an MVP, go out and give awards for the people that find the most butts. Build a wall of butts. Fill it up with, but that won't work either, but that won't work. Oh, this won't work, well. And then at the end of the sprint, go back, find 2 butts for those 1 butts, and start the process over until your team has found product market fit.